So the standard kind and the subversive. Oh my goodness.
They said we can sell the butt ones as long as they're
covered initially.
Yeah.
But an equal number of cons just didn't care, or they'd put rules like that on their site but not enforce them. Besides, there's a whole lot of content which isn't explicitly R-rated, but which I definitely wouldn't consider kid-friendly, like body pillows. Some body pillows are just art of a pony lying down, printed on a pillow. This was certainly the most PG-rated offering I could find.
Do you want to introduce yourself first?
Yep, I'm Hutchscotch. I'm XBC staff. I joined up around 17, so BronyCon 2017, and I was staff all the way through 2019 when the whole thing basically dissolved.
Mm-hmm. And so what is it that you... Well, first off, you've seen the whole last BronyCon thing she put together?
Yeah, I've seen a couple portions of it. I haven't sat down to watch the whole thing because it's like an hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough. Well, for someone like me who doesn't know a lot about the lore, it was more like a deep dive into a subculture I didn't know a lot about. But you take a lot of offense to what she said.
Well, yeah, it's partially in two parts. The one big thing is the whole... It's kind of weird to say. It kind of feels like she was coming at it from a very... I don't want to say... Not chuddy, that's not the right word for it. The way is that... I'm sorry, my thoughts are kind of disorganized right now.
Yeah, no worries. Are you going to say right-wing from like a right-wing perspective?
Not right-wing, kind of sex negative, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Okay.
Like, there's... The one thing is with... well, actually, one of the complaints I did have was where she said, like, oh, a bunch of bronies, they're right-wing. That's its own issue. Like, it's not a large contingent of the fandom.
Did she say a lot of bronies were right-wing? She said there was a large contingent of them that she experienced a lot of homophobia amongst the brony community.
Yeah, that's kind of the origins of it. As far as what people see as bronies, that term largely started on 4chan CO threads around 2010 when the show first premiered.
Mm-hmm.
It got so bad it got its own containment board, then it got sectioned off into MLP, which unfortunately blights the fandom to this day.
Mm-hmm. But when you say like sex negative, the stuff she was calling out in the documentary, I didn't really get that vibe from. I mean, she's calling out specifically the use of sexualizing characters who were canonically underage and or people who were interested in like having sex with what they would perceive to be animals, right?
Oh, the underage thing, no, not defending that. That throw that into the fucking sun with everything else. But the whole sex with animal thing, I really wish I had that paper on me, but it's basically there's a lot of representative stuff when it comes to that. It's the characters got very heavily anthropomorphized in the fandom, so I mean they're already somewhat like anthropomorphic in the show.
Mm-hmm.
But largely it just kind of came down to a thing where for a lot of people it was a very safe way to explore things about themselves, and surprisingly enough that's how a lot of people in the fandom came to realize they weren't exactly straight.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's not I'm not fapping to a dude, it's just a colorful cartoon horse.
Mm-hmm.
And then they realize, oh wait, I actually like dudes. And that happened way more than a lot of people get. Like, and there was a large contingent of homophobia because, again, you are going to get people who are from that 4chan crowd who just hate everyone who isn't the approved. So you're going to get a lot of right-wingers. You're going to get a lot of people who basically came from Pole.
Honestly, like I wouldn't take any problem with that. I mean, I think that any way you find your path, especially when it comes to something as complicated as coming out, that there's a lot of like wonderful validity to that. But I think what she was specifically calling out was the fact that this was pretty hyper prevalent in what should be something that is geared towards and also has a large child contingent, right? Like something that is there are large amounts of kids who would go to these festivals and stuff like that. So she was like, to me, what was problematic and what the media never seems to point out was, again, the fact that these elements do exist.
Yeah, that was there, and that is one thing is that actually goes back into the organizational thing, is BronyCon, there, because that is one thing, is that there were some more racy, I guess would be the best way to put it, dockies that were on the floor, so the hug pillows. There were a couple on there, but that was more so due to the fact that there were people pushing, like, even within the organization, like, "Hey, let's keep, Vendor Hall completely G-rated," do that, and then have, like, a separate After Dark to make sure that was completely, like, quarantined section off. But then there was basically pushback from upper parts of the con where it was like, "No, we don't wanna do that," because they were basically fighting against that same kind of representation themselves, is that they didn't want people to say, "Oh, there's an After Dark Vendor Hall," they basically didn't want anybody making any sort of negative connotations. So it basically came down to e there was nothing actually, like, R-rated on the con floor. As someone who was there and walked that giant
Absolutely. And
hellish hallway,
she says
so
that too in her video, but she's very quick to point out, she's like, there's no question that a very huge amount, especially of the pillows themselves that were featured, were hypersexualized. And it doesn't matter. She's like, then the problem with this is it would always enter this gray area where when she was there and she was reporting on it or trying to talk to them, she would be like, I don't know if it's appropriate to have like a pillow of that nature be openly displayed. And they would be like, oh, it's just a cute, cuddly cartoon character. And she was like, I would always fall into that gray area where like they could run away and play the defense. This isn't supposed to be sexualized. It's supposed to be something that's just, like, it's just adorable. Whereas as an outside like viewer, if you saw that, you would be like, well, that definitely like spread whatever. I don't know how the equivalent to say this with horses is, but like, spread wide with like a coy face on, things of that nature, where it would be like, it would always be a way for you to obfuscate whether or not this was what our intent was.
largely that's one thing, is that when she was talking about it, I think the way that the way that she put it, and I did think of a better way to put it, there are people in the fandom who are very much aware of that and who do want to keep that stuff more sectioned off, but at the same time, there's the way that a lot of people do react to it kind of makes a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation where
Yeah, of course.
it, where there are a lot of people who do want to just like take any sort of sexualized content, make sure it's quarantined. I'm in that crowd 100%. But there are also people who, by separating that off, there are people who are going to say, "Oh, well, you shouldn't have something separated off." Whereas in the end, it just kind of ended up as a milk toast. Well, we can put something more, I get more sexualized, but as long as it isn't anything, explicit.
Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of get this unhappy compromise between the two.
Mm-hmm. But then do you really take a lot of umbrage with what she was talking about in relation to maybe that just didn't exist at all within something that children attend, for example, especially coming from like, see, like, I think this is a multifaceted issue. And I think obviously there's something to be said by the fact that people are going to vilify something like this that they don't understand, regardless of whether or not these kind of things are taking place in the community, right? They're just gonna they're gonna be like, different, weird, I don't like it, I'm gonna vilify it. And I think there's a lot of benefits to some of the things you were just talking about. Like, there's a really good aspect to this being a vehicle for especially people to explore their own feelings that they wouldn't be able to otherwise. That's totally fine. But maybe that I don't think her criticism would be unfair in that respect then.
Yeah, I can genuinely see where you're coming from on that one. It's just that this is sort of an active debate that's been going on, and there's a from the clips that I've seen, I really just need to go back and watch the whole thing. But
Yeah,
from what
it'd be
I've
easier
seen,
for us to talk about it then. I mean, you can always come back on the show after as well. I'd love to finish this conversation too.
definitely, but yeah, no, it's from what I've seen of that, it's largely is that I've seen a lot of the contingent criticism based on that, taking on that exact same tone of "lol, this for kids, why have thing?" And it's just frustrating to see the conversation circle back to the 0 point of, you know, Rule 34 existing,
Mhm.
and that somehow being an impugnment of people who are in the fandom.
Well, to be fair, her entire 1 hour and 11 minute thing, it's only, I'd say, like 10 minutes of the third quarter where she really goes into a deep dive of this. Whereas she explains a little bit at the very start where she's like, I understand that any organization that is going to be very male dominated, eventually you're going to come to this point where there's going to be a contingent of them that, yes, want to have sex with the items or the thing that we're exploring in the first place, right? But it's only in the last 10 minutes where she's like, this needs to be addressed because it doesn't really get addressed in the media, because the media hyper focuses on vilifying your community, right? They always want to laugh at, like, oh, look, it's men in
Yeah.
pink and stuff like that. That's what they seem deeply concerned about. And she's like, but there are serious issues that needed to be brought up that never were really addressed formally, which happens to be the hypersexualization and the very prominent display of these kind of items.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really do need to actually, like, get through watching. Oh god. I've heard about I really just need to go. Would you mind if I just watched through that section so I can get a more constructive criticism that's not just made of random intermingled clips?
Yeah. Well, how about this? Why don't you watch the whole thing and then we can have like a full conversation about this? Like, I'm going to be streaming all week, every day. Like, I have no problem, rescheduling this. Like, unless I'm in the middle of an interview or doing like a segment on something specific, like, you have an open invitation to come back. But I would watch the whole thing in its entirety, because she's also like, I didn't walk away from this thinking that bronies are fundamentally evil. I thought that I was fundamentally misguided for having watched that Brony documentary and going on this whole, like, that was all I thought of bronies, and that, like, this is a wonderful community that's very inclusive and helps people who are neurodivergent. And that should not have been the takeaway from this. Like, when I saw hers, I was like, this is a very, just like, her history goes in so deep, where she was one of the original people who was in love with the show back when the fandom was mostly women, and how it blossomed and grew from there and then expanded. And then she's been to every BronyCon. She was quote unquote horse famous, and she was like paid to go to some of these, and because she does the voices for some online
Yeah, she was on
animation.
Friendship with Witchcraft.
Yeah. So and like, for someone who's outside of I didn't know any of this. It was like, and it ends, in my opinion, on a positive note. She talks about what it meant to her and her favorite moments at BronyCons, and how memeable everyone was and lovely and all that kind of stuff. Like, it doesn't end with me walking away thinking like there's something fundamentally wrong with bronies.
Okay, yeah, that was also a part of it, is because I did see a lot of people who just took it at that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, I think
like that.
I think you're right in saying that, like, for some people, if you hear the sexualization of children and sex with horses, one of those two things, that's all I'm going to remember sometimes, right? Like, even if I watch something for an hour and 20 minutes and that was like 5 minutes of it, I'm like, well, it doesn't matter how much friendship is magic. I heard about the horse sex and I heard about the other thing, so that's all I think about right now, right? So I understand that's probably where some people probably just got hyper focused, or that's all they took away from it. When I would say her overarching theme of it was, this is an important part of my life, and here's the story, and I want to tell you everything.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. That's that's good. I just seen a lot of you know what? I really should go through and watch this. I have no excuse, because I am actually a big fan of you, and I'm also a fan of Vosh, and I know that man gets clip chimped left and right, so
So do I. I've just found a way to avoid it. I just insert the word penis into all my conversations, and then there's nothing they can do.
an amazing strategy.
Yeah, exactly. It's been paying well. But like, no, honestly, like, I think you're coming in here in good faith. I appreciate that. And like, I would like to know your opinion on, like, it's hard for me to really dissect this, not coming from that, subculture. So I don't fully understand it. I'm a spectator learning from the internet, and B, you not having seen the whole documentary. So it's hard for me to be like, well, yeah, but what about when she did this, right?
Yeah, that's my bad on that one.
Yeah, no problem. So why don't we retake this conversation later in the week? Because
Definitely.
Okay. Yeah, pop back in. Just message me either on Discord or here, and then in the chat, and then I'll find a way to finish this conversation, and we can find out, because you obviously have insights that I wouldn't either. You're one of the organizers. Oh, actually, let me ask you one last question while I still have you here. So, why did it die out? Because her opinion at the end of it was that it was going to die out eventually. They could see just the arc, and they decided to pull the ripcord when it was at its kind of highest, kind of thing.
Actually, there's a long story there.
Oh, okay. We gotta save that for another day.
Yeah, that's I guess that might be saved for the full section sort of thing. But
Okay.
as far as it, like, BronyCon itself, to give sort of, like, I guess, a teaser, it kind of felt like the higher section of the convention gave up.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, there's still plenty of different PonyCons going on out there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the one thing. BronyCon
Well, she mentions that. She does say there's other PonyCons, but they're nowhere near the same numbers.
That's actually not, well, that's kind of the problem with COVID. Was there's a second con that was sort of in BronyCon's, like, TrotCon in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
They were getting some major growth, considering that they were about 2 weeks from BronyCon basically every year, and basically being the big con kind of gave BronyCon, like, oh, if you're going to go to a con, go to the big con. Well, that slot got just vacated because BronyCon doesn't exist anymore, and it looked like basically a large amount of people who came back just to go to the last BronyCon, or maybe like, hey, I want to go check this out. A lot of people liked it, and it looked like a lot of those people were going to be going to TrotCon, but then the Rona happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, yeah. There's just no question that pretty much ended all cons. But the numbers for the spin-off cons were comparable to the main BronyCon, is what you're saying.
There's generally at least 1K. Hold on one second. Sorry, I had to clear my throat.
Yeah, no worries.
There's generally around 1K at least per con, which is decently large by a lot of different fandom standards. But you're still Everfree Northwest. They've pulled 5K. There's actually cons that were growing, and none quite held BronyCon's numbers, but that's not to say that they weren't getting up into the range where, had BronyCon gone down and one more cycle went past, there's a very real chance they could have gotten eclipsed by another con.
Fair enough.
Which may have actually been part of the reason why they wanted to abandon ship, because they didn't want to get topped.
Yeah, fair enough. Interesting. Okay, well, yeah, why don't we regroup sometime next week?
To our monarch, Thomas Bone, you are the light that guides our path. To our lords, I'm Rav, Stephen, Ninetails Cosmic Fox, and Hans Josephine, we bow meekly for your pleasure. To our knights of the Round Table, Josh Mickelson, Dylan Byth, Alexander Thaler, Zach Christensen, Todd Buckingham, Todd Lajeunesse, Clement Chutskop, Skybear Games, Moss Beast, Political Puppy, Alan R., Andreas Chitoro, Good Poon Hates Cops, that's solid poon then, we salute you. And to all our merchants and farmers, you have our undying loyalty and love.